All right, let's start off in Pennsylvania, where Justice Alito ordered Pennsylvania officials to respond to Representative Mike Kelly's election challenge a day earlier in order to make it ahead of the safe harbor deadline. It seems as if he is very interested in getting this case to the Supreme Court. Do you read that? I mean, is that what's happening here?
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. As you know, he has issued an order in this case, actually a couple of orders, to them to separate out mail-in ballots that came in after the deadline that was set up by statute in the state. And he upped this in order to get the briefs in earlier. I think he's sending a signal that he is leaning toward issuing an injunction preventing the certification of the election in Pennsylvania, and then having full-bore arguments within the next few days to the full court. Or the full court may vote based on the briefs that are being filed tomorrow, given the time constraints. But this is a very big deal. This is a case in which Mike Kelly and a group of other elected officials challenged the constitutionality of legislation that was put in place and orders that were issued by the governor and the Secretary of State that were not done consistent with the Article 2 provision of the Constitution that requires things be done by the legislature. So there are constitutional limitations in the Pennsylvania Constitution, which cannot be changed by statute, which can only be changed by constitutional amendment, and certain things that governors and secretaries of state tried to do throughout this election campaign, which can only be done by the legislature. So there are a number of violations in here, and there's something called the Act 77,
yes,
which is the one that changed all of this stuff and did so in violation of the Pennsylvania Constitution.
Yeah, it's also fascinating. So in other words, what Pennsylvania just held based on that assessment is an unconstitutional election. And the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court just a couple of weeks ago basically told Mike Kelly and others that, hey, sorry that you have these grievances, but if you cared about them before, you should have brought them up many months ago. But if the election itself was unconstitutional, as you just laid out for us, that should cause some real problems with saying, okay, let's certify it and move it on.
I think that this case and the conduct of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has Florida 2000 all over it. This is a reenactment of the conduct of the Florida Supreme Court then, which was acting in an extremely partisan manner, and the Supreme Court slapped down consistently and finally just overruled them and ended the election. That's what's happening in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and with rare exception, all the lower courts there, have been basically running roughshod over the Pennsylvania Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. And so what you have here is, I think Alito's order sends a signal that there must be 5 votes on the court to strike down this statute and to rule that these ballots cannot be counted. And if those ballots are not counted, Donald Trump wins Pennsylvania.
Does this have an effect, if this does happen in the way that you think it will happen, does that impact any other states?
Yes. Well, the Supreme Court will show that you have to pay attention to what the state constitution says. And if that is upheld, and I'm sure there'll be language in any decision that's issued that says that. And if that's the case, that gives ammunition in a group of other lawsuits that are pending throughout the United States, as well as to state legislatures, which may learn something from the Supreme Court ruling about their powers under Article 2 to send their own set of electors if they believe that the election was corrupted, or to send no electors if they believe that the election was corrupted.
Oof.
Okay, let's move down to Georgia. There's been a lot of pressure from the team you're on, the Trump legal team, as well as others, for Georgia to correct many of the problems that exist in Georgia in the way that ballots are counted and the way the system is set up. Can you give us an update on where you think things need to go in Georgia and whether or not you're gaining traction?
The contest lawsuit was filed in Georgia by Cleta Mitchell. She's a Washington, D.C. lawyer on our team who is running the litigation down in Georgia with a group of phenomenal Georgia local attorneys. That contest suit is underway. They have gotten access, as you know, to the videotape, the famous videotape. That contest suit was pretty amazing in the sense that it got that video, which shows apparently illegal activity. Now, remember, what that video shows is that observers, Republican observers, Democratic observers, such as they were told to leave the counting area at a certain time. And they said everything was going to stop and everything would be resumed at 8:30 the next morning. As soon as everybody left, the bags were pulled out from under that black table and they started counting. Now, all these explanations from the Secretary of State and the people in charge say that there was nothing wrong about what happened. Forgets one thing. Everybody was told to leave, and then the counting started. That is a fact that is inescapable. And so it creates a presumption that the activity that occurred was illegal. So I think we're making pretty good headway in Georgia. I know the Georgia State Senate and House, the Assembly, are contemplating action that's being worked on today. So there are two avenues there, the contest suit and the legislature doing the same thing, either sending a Trump slate or sending no slate of electors to Congress.
Joe, I'm just a little confused. I thought that they were saying in Georgia that they're alleging that they were not told to leave, that the poll watchers were not told to leave, that they left of their own accord. Do I have that wrong?
No, they're lying. The elected, the officials in Georgia are lying. They told everyone to leave. And that film is miraculous. If the observers are there, they're ghosts. Mm-hmm. They are without bodies. There were no observers there because they were, in fact, told to leave. There are affidavits to that effect. So the Georgia elected state officials are lying about that.
Okay, so the poll watchers who were there on behalf of the Republican Party have given your team affidavits that say, yeah, they told us to get out of the room.
Yes.
Okay.
All of that stuff is in hand. Yeah.
Okay,
all right,
great.
A lot more coming up with Joe. We're here with Joe diGenova, legal analyst, and also a member of the Trump campaign legal team. Joe, since we're talking about Georgia, I just have a question. The DeKalb County doesn't know the Department of Voting Registration and Election. They're not sure if they have the ballot transfer forms that are used to record the chain of custody for absentee ballots. They seem to have misplaced them. How big of a problem is this?
It's huge because all those ballots have to be thrown out if they cannot establish the chain of custody. But let me make a point that's very important. In all these states we're talking about, in Philadelphia, Detroit, and Atlanta, in every one of these cities, Republican observers were kept out of the counting area and were not allowed to observe the actual opening of the envelopes to see if they were properly credible. This is absolutely significant because that observation presence is required by law, in some states by the Constitution, to ensure the integrity of the election. Joseph Stalin famously said, it's not the voters who make a difference, it's the counters who make a difference. And that's exactly what this election was about. It was about the counters and how they counted. The people who count the votes matter. And in each of those cities, Philadelphia, Detroit, and Atlanta, Republicans were systematically excluded from the observation areas in an effective way to be able to observe that. That means under the law, all of those ballots are null and void. Now, judges don't like to say that, but in fact, that is the law. And that's what this is about. That's what the Pennsylvania case going to the Supreme Court is about. Because Act 77 royally screwed up the observation process and a number of other things involving mail-in ballots.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really understand what the point of an observer is if they're not actually allowed to observe the ballots up close. It's like, what does the guy have to do? Set a ballot on fire in order for you to figure out, like, oh, wow, that's a huge problem.
Well, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, in its horrific decision where it rejected a beautiful finding by a Commonwealth court that said there was massive irregularities. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court said the law only requires that they be in the room. it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to observe. Well, that's literally absurd. That's why Alito wants to get his hands on the Kelly case, because it gives him an opportunity and the court an opportunity to talk about all the issues in the case.
Yeah, those rules would have come in really handy when I was taking the SATs. You know? Hey, Joe, I have a general question about your legal strategy. One of the pushbacks from the liberal press has been, well, as soon as these states certify the election results, the Trump legal team's challenges are over. So they feel pretty good about just accusing the Trump legal team of lying and saying, look, these are certified, it's over, there's no more race. What happens after a state certifies its election? Can it be decertified, and how does the Trump legal team handle that?
Well, it can be decertified if the Supreme Court or another court, but more importantly, the Supreme Court says the certification is null and void because of constitutional violations.
Right.
A certification is only of value in terms of getting ready to get the electors set up on the 8th and the 14th. But all of those deadlines, even the 8th and the 14th, are not set in stone. The Supreme Court has the authority to stop and suspend things if it believes that the election has been corrupted. So the certification is, in ordinary times, a simple administrative step, and the question becomes, who can certify? Under the Constitution, states may have given that authority. In other words, state legislatures may have delegated that authority, which they have under the U.S. Constitution, to the governors and secretaries of state. But they could take that authority to certify back at any time, not with a bill that requires the signature of a government, but by simply a joint resolution of both houses saying, we're not certifying and we're not sending the electors that you certify. So certification is an important step, but it is a step that can be reversed either by a court or by a state legislature.
Okay, so these states, though, that have Republican legislatures, how dependent then is this entire process? Even if the Supreme Court says that, you can't count these ballots, you can't count those ballots, and throws everything upside down, is it totally dependent then on these state legislators to decide that they're not going to certify? Or are we even looking at any kind of like a revote at all? Could that even happen?
Well, there's not going to be a revote. There's no time for that. This is all now about the votes, the legal votes that were cast and the illegal votes that were cast.
Okay.
And you have to be able to separate those out. And that's what this is about. There's not going to be another election for the president.
But Joe, in some states, you can't separate them out because they destroyed the forensic evidence. Like in Georgia, once you separate the envelopes from the ballot, you can't verify those.
And that was their goal. And if you can't verify them under the law, those votes must be nullified. That's why the Supreme Court ruling is absolutely essential. Because once the Supreme Court rules, for example, that the Pennsylvania, let's say it's 300,000, 400,000, 600,000 votes that the Supreme Court throws out. That then tells the state legislatures, you are free. We've told you now that you have this power. I would think that all these Republican legislatures would be emboldened to do what the law requires. But they don't. But even if they don't, if the Supreme Court rules that those votes have to be thrown out, they're gone. And that may end up turning 4 states. We don't know that right now because we don't know how the Supreme Court is going to rule, although Alito seems to be hinting that he has deep concerns about the way Pennsylvania acted. And Pennsylvania is like a domino. You get that one, you're going to get 2 or 3 others without a question.
Meanwhile, 76 members of the Pennsylvania legislature are right now asking Congress to reject Pennsylvania's electors. And in Arizona, a statement overnight that there are members of the Arizona legislature, a lot of them, who are now calling for a decertification of the 2020 election. So there's a lot of movement going on around this. Joe diGenova, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, if Alito rules tomorrow or on the 9th that Pennsylvania screwed up royally with its unconstitutional act, that will set in motion a group of dominoes in many states. It will embolden the legislatures and maybe some federal judges, although they're pretty much out of it at this point, to do the right thing, to do the constitutional thing and only count legal votes. It would be millions of votes that would be thrown out, and properly so, because this was a corrupt election.
Yeah, all I want to see is a fair hearing predicated on facts and fewer political decisions to throw out cases because your friends don't like that you'd consider them. Thank you very much, Joe.